A sinkhole didn't just appear in my yard. It opened like a slow-moving mouth, swallowing a patch of lawn I'd cared for since the late 80s. At first, I thought it was a simple erosion issue, maybe too much rain, or maybe the soil finally giving up after years of Midwest winters. But as I crouched near the edge, flashlight in hand, I saw something I hadn't expected at all. A clay sewer pipe, old, cracked, and definitely not mine. I remember muttering, "Well, would you look at that," the same way folks my age say it when we're trying not to panic. I was 68, too old to be dealing with surprises that involve crawling underground. So I called my son first, then a plumber, then reluctantly the HOA. And that's where the real story starts. Rising action happened the second the plumber climbed up from the hole, wiped mud off his gloves, and said, "This isn't your line. This belongs to the HOA, and it's been failing for years." Now, I'd lived in this neighborhood a long time. I'd served on the HOA board in the early 90s, before I wised up and left. I knew they had a habit of forgetting responsibilities whenever it benefited their budget. But a sewer line, buried under my yard, and collapsing. That wasn't forgetful. That was convenient. When I called the HOA president, a woman who could turn her nose up higher than any person I've ever known, she simply said, "Our records show no utilities under your property. You're mistaken. That sinkhole is your problem." My problem? A hole in the ground big enough to eat a lawn chair, and apparently, according to her, my personal responsibility. Conflict arrived 2 days later when the sinkhole grew, nearly doubling in size. A neighbor walking his dog noticed and said, "You know that line used to serve the old clubhouse, right? They abandoned it after the renovation. That clubhouse renovation happened nearly 20 years earlier." Suddenly things made sense. Instead of removing their old sewer line, the HOA had simply shut it off and let it rot underground on my ground. I wasn't having it. Not at my age. Not after paying dues for decades. Not after hearing the HOA lecture me last year over the height of my mailbox post. So, here came the comeback. I hired a private inspector, a retired civil engineer who still carried himself like someone who knew absolutely everything about pipes. He spent an afternoon measuring, mapping, photographing, documenting angles, slopes, and materials. After 4 hours he looked at me and said, "Oh yeah, this is theirs." And they knew. They absolutely knew. He provided a full report, stamped and signed, and I marched myself into the HOA office like a man carrying a lit match toward a stack of dry hay. The president barely looked up before saying, "We cannot assist with homeowner maintenance issues." I placed the report on her desk. 5 pages in, her face went pale. 10 pages in, she started sweating. By the time she reached the back of the packet, she looked like she'd swallowed a whole lemon. This can't be correct," she whispered. "It's correct," I said, "and you're going to fix it." She mumbled something about needing a board vote. I reminded her the board's liability insurance would love to hear about decades-old negligence. Then I reminded her I had a friend at the local news station, one who loved HOA stories more than his morning coffee. Rising action again hit when the HOA tried, bless their stubborn hearts, to claim it was a shared responsibility. They posted a notice on the community bulletin board saying they would contribute a portion of repair funding. Well, that didn't sit well with the neighbors. Everyone knew this was their line. And everyone knew if the HOA got away with dumping this on me, they'd do it to anyone. The neighborhood rallied. Seniors with time and opinions are a powerful force. People started showing up at meetings, asking questions, demanding transparency. Some brought copies of the report. Others brought photos of the sinkhole. One brought cookies because that's how people our age wage war politely. By the third meeting, the pressure was too much. The HOA finally voted unanimously to take full responsibility. They hired a crew to remove the old line, stabilize the soil, fill the sinkhole, and resod my yard. But the payoff wasn't the repair. It was the moment the contractor's foreman knocked on my door and said, "Just so you know, sir, that pipe didn't collapse this week. It didn't collapse this year. It collapsed long ago." They must have known. I just smiled, not smug, just satisfied. Because sometimes, doing the right thing takes persistence, documentation, and a willingness to stare an HOA president straight in the eyes until she blinks first. When the yard was restored, I stood on the new grass, hands on my hips, feeling something I hadn't felt in a while. Victory. Not the loud kind, the quiet, earned kind. Like winning a chess match after a long, thoughtful game. And that's when I realized something. These HOA stories, they're never really about pipes, trees, fences, mailboxes, or sinkholes. They're about people, good neighbors, bad leadership,